there was a man who was just feeling bothered because he and his wife had had a fight the night before. And so he thought, I've got to call her and make things right and, try to fix stuff. So he calls home at the afternoon. The maid picks up the phone. So he asks for his wife by name. And she says, no, she can't come right now. She can't be interrupted. He said, well, go get her. Why can't she be interrupted? The maid said, well, her boyfriend came over. And they're upstairs. And she said she didn't want to be interrupted. And the man was just enraged. So he said, well, you know where I keep my shotgun, right? She said, well, yeah. He says, well, go get it and shoot them both. And the maid says, well, all right. And so he goes, and he's listening. She put the phone down, and hears a couple of blasts. She comes back. She says, okay, it's done. What should I do with the bodies? He says, well, just throw them in the pool, and when I get home, I'll take care of it. And she said, well, we don't have a pool. And he said, is this 738-2719? Some advice is bad advice. I don't want to ask how many people have been the victim of bad advice that has come through our lives. And sometimes the bad advice comes from good people. Sometimes it doesn't, so it makes it more of a challenge. But you hear the bad advice. This is a great deal. Oh my goodness. This is a once-in-a-lifetime deal. You can secure your financial future with this deal. That's great advice sometimes, right? Or you two should get married. That's not always good advice. Or what could possibly go wrong? How many of us have been victimized by the what could possibly go wrong advice? I built a ramp one time as a kid that I was going to jump off it with my bike. And after we built it, and we were little, we didn't know, no one knows what they're doing when they build a ramp, right? But we were putting sticks up like this to hold the ramp. And my friend and I looked at it. What could go wrong? I'm not going to tell you what went wrong, but it took a lot of Mercurochrome to inform over my back. Advice can be sticky stuff, especially when we're called on to give it to hurting people. Proverbs lets us know, like apples of gold in settings of silver, is a word fitly spoken, which means when you bring the right advice at the right time, the right person, it can be a powerful thing. Likewise, we know, like wormed apples and toxic waste is a word misspoken. How many times has somebody said something to you, wrong time, wrong word, and it has you're still remembering it today, and it has just eaten you up one side and down the other. Now, often when we are in a situation where somebody's hurting, we walk away from that. We run from that because we don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. And we're thinking, we're rational. We're not rude or anything. We're just thinking we're rationalizing. We don't want to spare this hurting person more agony by us coming and saying something stupid and embarrassing ourselves. I was at Columbia Bible College. It was Sunday after church. I went to the parking lot, backed into the parking lot. Nobody was around. As I got out of my car, I noticed the guy next to me was sitting in his car seat, driver's seat. Windows were down. It was a hot day. And I said, how you doing? And he looked up at me, and he was obviously been bawling for some time, and he was just a mess. And he said, awful. I'm just doing awful. And what should you say? Well, of course I knew what to say. Well, have a good day. And I walked by. Don't come to me for counseling, man. Don't go somewhere else. Not here. That's not my gift. You say something stupid when somebody's hurting, you really feel awful. But here's the deal. I believe biblically. When somebody you're in a relationship with, somebody you love, when they have a Job experience, and they will, because Job's story is our story, it's your story, it's my story, it's your friend's story. Sooner or later, something will go wrong. You can't run from it. You have to run to it. Whether it's a health issue, or a kid's issue, or a finance issue, or a business issue, or work, I was let go, whatever. Often we don't know what to say, so we just pretend like we're too busy, and then next time we see them, pretend like nothing has ever happened because we don't want to say the wrong thing, and that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. It's an assignment given to us by God. So how do we handle it? What do we do with that? Because as long as you're in a relationship with somebody, you're going to be put in that situation. What do you do when that happens? Well, if you've got your Bibles, turn with me as we continue on in our series in Job. Job chapter 2. Job's friends. Oh, Job's friends. Don't you wish you had friends like Job's friends? On one level, you do. Job chapter 2, verse 11. It says, when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite, none of these guys are Israelites, because Job's not even an Israelite. This is before Abraham, most probably. Heard about all the troubles that had come upon him. They set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud. And they tore their robes, and they sprinkled dust on their heads, and they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. And no one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. If this is all you knew about Job's friends, it was all over from this point, it was done. That was all, the book of Job just ended. What would you say about his friends? Well, they're good guys. Yeah, they're good guys. They're dedicated to him. Some language here, but language throughout the book, it seems to infer that they're in a covenant with him. Kind of like David and Jonathan, or a marriage type covenant. These guys were like in a men's frat group. These guys were like in a life group. They had done life together. These are Job's three best friends kind of thing. And there's a lot of principles we could keep drawing from this whole deal. But when someone's life crashes, if you are just not real close, it's not the time to work on being their best friend. This kind of ministry is really reserved for close relationships. You notice these guys invest their time. Now, odds are, if Job is the greatest man in the East, that these guys are numbers 2, 3, and 4. I mean, these are probably very successful, very busy. They don't have time for this type guys. But yet, they take off. They go to be with their friend, not for just a short time, but they're with him for a week. Notice that they walk to him. When they heard what was going on, they didn't suddenly get real busy. They didn't just simply pray for him. They went to him. They went to him. Friends would walk toward friends in pain, not away from friends in pain. So much was their comfort to Job. Job felt so secure with these guys that he feels like he can just give words to his grief. And so he does. I can share anything with these guys. I can share my heart with these guys. I mean, picture it. All these guys are sitting. Job's on an ash heap, right? So these friends are there with him, sitting with him. And Job is scratching his sores with broken pottery. And his friends are bawling. They obviously love him. They've torn their clothes, which is a sign of mourning. They're putting dust on their head. And so Job and his friends are just sitting there, just crying together. You say, these are good friends. These are good guys. These are the kind of friends that I want if I go through something. This is who I want, Job's friends. And so Job feels, I can talk. And so he does. In chapter 3, it says, after this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Now remember, Satan wanted him to curse God and thought that he would. Take away all of his stuff, Satan says, and he will curse you to your face. Well, he never does. And he's not cursing God here either. But he does curse the day of his birth. He wishes he was dead. If you can imagine, Job, put yourself in his place. I've been through a lot less than Job. And I thought, you know what? It would just be better to be done down here. He says, may the day of my birth perish. And the night it was said, a boy is born. Verse 11, he says, why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? It would have been so much easier. Verse 16, why was I not hidden in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? Could mean, why was I even conceived? Look at what I've had to deal with. And then he goes in verse 20. He says, why is light given to those in misery? And life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death and does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasures, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave. What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil. Job is just a man lamenting. Real important. He's not cursing. Lamenting, giving voice to your pain. It's not the same thing as cursing God. If I break my arm, I might scream out, ah! That's not the same. It just hurts. If someone's heart is broken, life is broken, they may give voice to it. That's not the same thing as cursing God. Now, they may incorporate cursing of God with it. It's a different deal. Job does not. Notice too, Job wants to die. I don't know if you've ever been in so much pain you just want to die. He does. But suicide is just not an option. It's just not an option. And it's not like they just invented that. But that's not an option. Job is in pain, huge. But he still has a degree of righteousness about him. And so God wants to take me. God's going to have to take me, but I wish he would take me really soon. But I'm not going to interfere with what God has. And if you know the end of the story, it's a good thing he didn't. So Job's friends begin to talk. Now, understanding the book of Job is really not difficult. Pretty easy book to outline. You got the prologue, chapter 1 and 2. You got the dialogue, 3 through 41. And you got the epilogue, chapter 42. Now, the dialogue, that chapter 3 through 41, that's a long part of the book. That's often a real boring part of the book. This is usually, if we try to read through the book of Job, we will stall out somewhere in the middle there. Because you know what? It just seems like this is going nowhere. For crying out loud, here we go again. They keep saying the same old thing over and over and over. What are we doing? There's a reason why. The author was not a literary simpleton. The guy was pretty much a genius. What he's trying to do with his readers, if you'll stick with it, is by the time their dialogue is done, you're agreeing with Job. You're not just mentally thinking about it. You're not observing anymore. You are entered into the story. And you're saying, that's right. For crying out loud, I wonder how God will answer that one. And where is God? And I just wish God would speak. So that finally when God shows up, you're going, it's about time. Let's hear what he's got to say. And God's going to give a whole different answer than what Job had expected, anybody had expected. As you look at this, we've got 3 friends. We're going to name them Eliphaz. We're going to name him Eli. Bildad, we'll call him Billy. And Zophar, Zoe. So Eli, Billy, and Zoe. They're good friends, right? But if you notice Job's lament, Job 3, he asks the why question 5 times. Normal when somebody's going through deep, deep water to ask the why question. Why me? Why now? Why this? And Job's friends are fine until they try to answer that question. You can't answer that question. First of all, you don't know the answer to that question. You can't say, well, he had too much to drink, because there are other people out on the road with too much to drink and they get home safely. So why this situation? Well, there are bad people in the world. Well, there are bad people in the world, but other folks seem to be okay and get by with it. Well, how come this situation? Well, the fall. Well, yeah, the fall is legitimate, but other people live in the fall and are okay. How come right now? We don't know the why. And if you did know the why, is it going to bring comfort? Is it going to be, oh, it's okay that my kids are all dead now. That's okay now. It's not going to bring comfort. So his friends were fine until they tried to answer that. We don't even try to answer that. Also notice in Job 3, Job doesn't curse God. He laments. He shares his soul. He doesn't say anything negative about God. Now he will say some negative stuff about God, but not until his friends open their mouth. When we are called, we've got an assignment by God to meet with somebody who's hurting, it's an incredible opportunity for good. But you know what? It's an incredible opportunity for bad as well. How many people do you know? They don't come to church anymore because when the wheels fell off, the church wasn't there, or the church people said something bad, or the church disregarded. When Christian folk do something, do not respond right when there's crises. That's horrific. Yet, on the same handle, when Christians respond properly when there's crisis. I have a friend back home. She was going to a different church. Her husband came to our church. Her husband ended up having an affair, leaving her. And she sat down in my office. I remember talking with her. And one of the things she said to me, she said, my church has kind of kicked me off to the side with this whole thing. This is really a taboo thing. And we weren't cheering this kind of thing on. She said, but my church has just ripped me off. But your church And I've had people coming around and people helping and people supporting me. Well, she still goes to that church today. She's left the other one. How many people do we know with that? We've got an incredible opportunity, as these guys did. But they tried to answer the why. Let's chapter 4. And we're just going to kind of breeze through here a little bit of Job's friends, chapter 4 on. And in doing so, we want to get a flavor for how not to do this. We want to get a flavor for God when you call my name and you hand me that assignment, because you will. Some of y'all, no question in my mind, you're in the middle of that assignment right now, and maybe you're just standing still and you're not going towards it. I want you to understand the mindset of Job's friends. It's going to be real helpful as we go through. You can think of like a triangle. And the top pinnacle of the triangle is called the retribution principle. Now, you know this as you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. Is this a biblical concept? Yes, it's a biblical concept. You reap what you sow always spiritually. On this earth, often you do. Not always, though. We know of people who have taken very good care of their bodies and their health, and still they get cancer and they die prematurely. We also know of people who abuse their body and they just, George Burns lived to 99, a heavy smoker. And we know those kind of things happen. But generally speaking, if you steward your body properly, you'll have less issues, health, than folk who don't. The retribution principle. What Job's friends were saying is this is always the issue. Always. On this plane. It's all retribution principle. You always reap what you sow. Second thing, they said God's justice. Saying, you know what? God will always be fair. He will always do it right. God will never make a miscall on this one. And in this situation, the third thing is Job's righteousness. And so the friends are saying, you see this, the friends are saying, we know this is always true, Job. And we know this is always true. God's never going to call it wrong. So, Job, if this is always correct and this is always correct and you got problems, you know what? I think right here's the problem, Job. You're going to reap what you sow. And if you're reaping this, then and God's always fair. Obviously, that's the problem. Now, what's going to happen with Job is he's going to say, well, if this is the principle, this is always true, I know my heart. And I know I'm not doing worse stuff right now than I was when everything good was happening. Therefore, I wonder about this. This is what's going to get Job in a little bit of trouble. So this is the argument that goes from chapters 3 all the way on. What's going to happen is his friends and Job go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and they start real nice and kind, and it goes slowly. With his friends and with Job, it picks up heat and it picks up steam, so that by the end, just before everybody's so exasperated that they finally quit, they are saying a lot of things to each other that are not good things. But in not that you might not have ever been there. You don't know what, maybe you can't relate to Job. But just listen, chapter 4, verse 1. Then Eliphaz the Temanite replied. Job just lamented. He just shared his heart. It says, and you notice Eliphaz is probably the oldest because he went first. He's probably speaks from, if you follow all of his speeches, he often refers to tradition, the things I've seen, the things I've experienced in life. He's speaking out of life experience. He says, if someone would venture a word with you, will you be impatient? Can I speak in your life for just a moment, Job? Think how you've instructed many, how you've strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled, and you've strengthened faltering knees. He's saying, Job, you've been there. You have the right words. You're a good man. I understand that. But now trouble comes to you and you're discouraged. It strikes you and you're dismayed. Should not your piety be your confidence and your blameless ways your hope? Then he goes to the retribution principle. Think about this, Job. Who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? He says, isn't this, you always reap what you sow, Job? Isn't this right? Now, he forgot about the martyrs, and there's Jesus, and he's not around yet, maybe. But he's saying the retribution principle is set. He says in chapter 5, he says, I myself have seen a fool taking root, but suddenly his house was cursed. I've seen guys that are sinful and evil as all who knows what, and it seems like they're being blessed, but then suddenly, just like you, Job, they're taken. He says, his children are far from safety, crushed in court without a defender. And kind of going backwards at Job here, but saying, your kid's death, it's kind of your fault, Job, because you're in the evil category. And he'll go on and say, don't worry about it. We've all sinned. And then verse 17, he says, blessed is the man whom God corrects, so do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. He's saying, Job, this is a good thing. All this bad stuff that's happened to you. See, God's just trying to get your attention. You kind of thought you were a Christian before, but see, now he just wants to bring you to him, and he wants to get you the next step, and he wants to make you sharper and better. And see, it's not a bad thing, Job. It's not a bad thing. Well, Job pushes back a little bit on that. And he's very polite. Chapter 6 and 7, he's kind to Eliphaz, but he pushes back and says, I don't know. And we're not talking about Job's words. We'll get those next week. But then Bildad steps up, Billy. Now, Billy is kind of a straight-up, no-nonsense guy, and he just watched Job step on Eliphaz's words and reject Eliphaz's counsel, and so Billy turns it up a little bit. Bildad the Shuhite replied, how long will you say such things? Talking to Job, your words are a blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Back to the justice thing. Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. Your children died and it was their fault. They were all a bunch of sinners. There's some counsel for you and some comfort. Look at this. If you will look to God and plead with the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, even now he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your rightful place. Your beginnings will seem humble, so prosperous will be your future be. Now this is real important, because this is going to be the separation between all of Job's friends and Job. Job's friends continuously, this is their concern, that Job, you get your stuff back. Job, you get your place in society back. You get your reputation back. And so tell you what, Job, look at your heart. You've done something wrong, and maybe you're not sure what it is, but look, deeply look. Figure out what it is and confess it so God won't be mad at you, so you can get your stuff back. Now, isn't this exactly what Satan said? He's only righteous so he can get stuff. The friends are spouting forth Satan's philosophy. If Job would have listened to his friends, good, godly, deep friends, he would have gotten himself into a hurt. Satan would have won. But he didn't go down that road. If you go through the whole book, Job never laments the loss of his stuff, but always, where's God? Do I not have a relationship with God anymore? Have I really fallen out of favor? So Job pushes back on Bildad. Job challenges that thinking. Then Zophar, cistern, Zoe. Now, Zoe is if Bildad was a no-nonsense guy, Zoe, oh my goodness, he's just straight up mean. He is your mean boss person. And so chapter 11, then Zophar the Naamathite replied, are all these words to go unanswered? Is this talker to be vindicated? He's talking about Job. Will your idle speech reduce men to silence? Will no one rebuke you when you mock? You say to God, my beliefs are flawless and I'm pure in your sight. Oh, how I wish that God would speak, that he would open his lips against you and disclose to you the secrets of wisdom. For true wisdom has two sides. Know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin. Here's Job. He's lost his family. He's lost all of his stuff. Talk about injustice. The Sabians who hate God have taken it, or the Chaldeans who hate God have taken it. His servants, he's got 3 of them left, or 4 of them. They are not real happy with him because all their families are gone. Everything, he's sitting there in incredible pain. He hasn't had any sleep. Everything's going wrong. Death would actually probably for Job be a release at this point. And this guy is saying, you haven't got half of what you deserve. What else could there be? What else could there be? Job, what is the deal? This is Zophar's in his face. And then I don't have it on the screen because we're going to look at Job's words next week. But just listen for a second. 12:1. Job replied, doubtless you are the people and wisdom will die with you. You the man, you know everything, don't you? Yeah, boy, when you guys die, the whole world's going to be in a mess, won't they? So Job has got a gift of sarcasm, and he turns it on, and as time goes on, he turns it up a little bit further. And so Job has a speech for these guys, pushing back. Round 2. They all give it a shot again. Eliphaz, chapter 15. Eliphaz, Eli, the Temanite replied. By the way, the friends, Eli, Billy, and Zoe, when they try to answer the why question, they become Larry, Curly, and Moe. And that's exactly what's going on. They are just making a circus. Verse 2 of chapter 15, it says, would a wise man answer with empty notions? Now, this is the nice guy. He's starting to be agitated himself, or fill his belly with the hot east wind? You're nothing but an airbag. Would he argue with useless words, with speeches that have no values? You know what you're saying is pathetic, Job. You undermine piety and hinder devotion to God. You're a bad example of everything. Your sins prompt your mouth. You adopt the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, not mine. Your own lips testify against you. Are you the first man ever born? Were you brought forth before the hills? Do you listen in on God's counsel? You and God are like that. He tells you all this stuff. You keep trashing what we're telling you. What do you know that we don't know? What insights do you have that we don't have? The gray-haired and the aged are on our side. The wisest people agree with us, Job. Men even older than your father. Are God's consolations not enough for you? Words spoken gently to you. Oh, gently? This is gentle? Well, it's going to get a lot worse, so maybe this is gentle. Now, if you're talking with someone, you're arguing with somebody, you're trying to speak wisdom into their life, and they don't get it, or they keep blowing you off, what do? Turn up the volume, don't you? You get a little in their face a little bit more. You start getting a little bit more personal, and that's exactly what's going on. That's what happens. Chapter 16, I don't have this one on the screen, but Job's reply. He says, I have heard many things like these. Miserable comforters are you all. Will your long-winded speeches never end? What ails you that you keep on arguing? I also could speak like you if you were in my place. I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you, but my mouth would encourage you. Comfort from my lips would bring you relief. Well, Bildad doesn't like that. Chapter 18, verse 1. Then Bildad the Shuhite replied, when will you end these speeches? Be sensible, and then we can talk. Why are we regarded as cattle and considered stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself to pieces in your anger. He's scratching himself with that pottery. Is the earth to be abandoned for your sake? Is it all about you, Job? It says the lamp of the wicked is snuffed out. The flame of the fire stops. The flame of his fire stops burning. Saying, come on, Job, the retribution principle. Quit talking. We all know bad things happen to bad people. That's what goes on here. Now, let me help us for just a second, because we all have these type of friends in our lives on occasion. But 12th century actually started, the Roman Catholic Church started the Inquisition courts. This went all the way to the 18th century in different contexts. But the Inquisition courts were about this. The church saw people denying what they considered the truth, and they were going to bring them back to the truth even if it required torture. So there were some horrific tortures in the Inquisition. And if you read about the Inquisition from a deeply Protestant view, I'm deeply Protestant, then it will look like all of these inquisitors are just evil, horrific, sadistic people who enjoy hurting people. And perhaps that may have been true for some people. But if you think about their perspective, their paradigm, if this person continues to believe like this, he will be in hell forever. And so we're going to do whatever we have to do. I mean, even if it's torture, we're going to do whatever we have to do to keep him or her out of hell. And so this doesn't excuse what they did, but I think it might help when we have friends who may come and they say stupid things, wrong things. What's really their motivation? Is it really they just want to stomp on us and make us feel bad? These guys, it wasn't them. Actually, they came, they left their businesses, they left their lives, they tore their clothes, put dust on their head, mourned with him for 7 days. I think their heart is to say, Job, you're not seeing it. You need to see this. I want you to be better. I want you to be okay. And if you do A, B, C, you're going to get better. This is when people come to us when we're in the Job situation and they say stupid things. It is helpful to know their motivation in heart is probably right. They probably are not trying to hurt me and trying to get under my skin and on and on. They're probably not. So want to be careful about throwing rocks at these guys. Where are all the other friends? They didn't show. They weren't there. They weren't interested in helping Job. Bildad drives home that whole retribution principle. And then in verse 19 he's talking about the evil person. And again, he describes all of Job's life here in this chapter. But he says, this evil person who had all these bad things happen to him that Job had, that he just describes, he says, he has no offspring or descendants among his people, no survivors where once he lived. Evil people, that's what happens to them. Men of the west are appalled at his fate. Men of the east are seized with horror. Surely such is the dwelling of an evil man and is the place of one who knows not God. Job, you don't know God. You're as evil as they come. Look at what's retribution principle is true. The justice of God is true. Look what's happening to you. You're as evil as they come. So Job pushes back. If he would have said, I guess you're right. Let me think of the evil stuff so I can, because if I said, think of some area in your life where you can grow, you couldn't come up with something. Of course you could come up with something. Job could have done the same thing. Well, I guess this is the thing. I'm sorry, God, forgive me. Give me my stuff back. Satan would have won. He doesn't go down that road. In chapter 22, round 3, Eliphaz speaks. Verse 21, he says, submit to God and be at peace with him. In this way, prosperity will come your way. You're going to get your stuff back. Accept instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored. Again, get your stuff back, Job. That's what you need to do. Job pushes back and says, that's not the deal. That's not what I need to do. Chapter 25, Bildad is so exasperated. Short chapter. He just says, Job, you're a sinner and a worm and a maggot. Now that's what you do, right? When you argue and they don't see your way, what do? Just call them names, right? Just call them names. Heap it there. And another thing, your mother's ugly, and he's gonna just dump it on him. And Zoe is so frustrated he doesn't even want to speak. Forget it. Can't even talk to this guy. So what do we do with this? Let me ask you a couple of questions. When somebody that you love, the wheels fall off, they go south, and your name is called on, God hands you the assignment card. It's your assignment. What do you do? How do you deal with this? How do you apply all this stuff? First thing you need to do is recognize that this is an assignment from God. He has called you to step into their lives. He's called you. May have called some others as well. He's had some friends, but he's called you. And so you don't want to run. Proverbs 17:17, a great verse. It says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Don't you love that? The reason why God gives us people close to us is because he knows we're going to be going through stuff, and we need that support. We just can't do it on our own. And perhaps he's given you to somebody, and the reason why he's given you to somebody is to help them through their thing. You can't run from it. Second thing is to be there. When I was candidating at my church in Wisconsin, I was right out of school. I was a kid, and on the weekend I'm candidating. Saturday afternoon, I do a thing with the junior high, and they're all kind of watching me taking notes. And Diane, we're going to do a senior high thing that night, and Diane's in senior high, but she couldn't come, so she came to the junior high thing, and I made her my assistant, and we worked together. And then the senior high thing that night, I met her brothers, Dan and Mikey, and then the next day is Sunday at church, and I'm meeting with the different people, and getting ready to go into the sanctuary, and on my way in behind those doors, there is this gentleman. I shake his hand, and he says that he is Diane and Mikey and Dan's dad, and his wife and the girls are on their way to church right now, and they should be here any second. Says, oh, nice meeting you. I go on in. About halfway through the pastor's message, someone comes up with a note and says that Diane, the mom's name was Lois and Katie were in a terrible car accident, pray. And so he took off, and he grabbed me, and we went to the hospital, and we were met by the coroner, and Lois was killed, the mom. Diane was killed, and Katie was just so busted up. It was just incredible. And so I'm sitting in the cafeteria of the hospital with Dan and Mikey, and their lives are just shattered. And Brent, Dan's best friend, and this is 8th grade or freshman year in high school, comes walking in, and he's just bawling. And he just sits down next to Dan, not a word. What words do you say? There are no words. He just sits there and he just cries. And he puts his head down and he just cries. That comfort to know somebody was right there. There's nothing you could say. He was just there to be with him at his greatest need. Be there. You can do that. You don't know the words. You don't need the words. Be there. Number 3. Concentrate on Romans 12:15, which says, mourn with those who mourn. Notice, Paul doesn't say, fix those who mourn, or cheer up those who mourn. That's your assignment. Or give them great counsel. He doesn't say that. Mourn with those who mourn. Again, I don't have the word, but I can mourn with those who mourn. I can do that. Or use your words wisely. Again, these guys, their words, some of them were good, some of them not so good. But by the way, let me parenthesis for just a second. Whenever you quote out of the book of Job, you've got to keep in mind that Job and his friends said some things that were doctrinally wrong. At the end of the book, God's going to yell at his friends and say, you guys spoke wrong of me to Job. And then Job's going to look back at some of the stuff he said and it's going to say, I said things that I didn't understand. I repent. You don't have to repent unless you've done something wrong. He spoke wrongly. We should be careful what we quote Job 3 through 41. But you also need to know this, that these guys say some good things. There is some profound, deep, powerful truths there. And if you're looking for some quiet time challenge, you go through this section, go through Job, trying to figure out with the rest of Scripture what they say that's right, what they say that's not right. It's good. So your words can be good. So you want to use them wisely. Acknowledge the situation. Don't pretend like nothing happened. They know, they're very much aware of what happened. And even if it is, I heard that your parents are splitting. I heard that so-and-so died. Acknowledge. Don't pretend like you don't know. Skirt around it. Make them feel better. It's not going to help. Express concern. I'm just so sorry. I'm just so sorry. Be genuine. What are you thinking? You're thinking, I don't know what to say. You can say, I don't know what to say, but I just want you to know I care. What else is there? Ask them how they feel. Don't assume you know how they feel. My dad perished, 15 years ago now. He was a good man, but we were never close emotionally. Never close emotionally. I've got a friend whose dad is dying now, but he and his dad were like best friends from forever. They work together. His dad is a pastor, planted the church, handed it over to his son, was this godly mentor. They work together. Do I know what he feels like with his dad perishing? No. Even though I've been through that, I have no idea. Or somebody whose dad abused or hurt them, and died with that unresolved. Do I know how that person's feeling? No, I don't. Don't assume you know how they feel. When they thought I had brain cancer, it's interesting how people treat you when they think that terrible things are going on. But I was at church, and one of my kids came up to me, and she said, no one was around. She said, Pastor Mark, and you can tell Jenny was really worried. She said, are you afraid? And I thought, no one's asked me that. Let me think. I suppose I am, Jenny. I think I'm okay with dying right now. I'm really afraid for my wife and my kids, and I trust him, though. But just that question helped me process some things that I needed to process. So use your words wisely. Now, there's some things you shouldn't say. Definitely some things you shouldn't say. First thing that you shouldn't say, it's God's will. Now, of course, this is God's will, yeah, but don't. That's not what they want to hear right there. That's not going to bring comfort. Oh, it's God's will, therefore I'm okay. Look at all you have to be grateful for. Now, again, we want to take somebody's perspective. They're looking at this and they're crying and hurting. So if we can take it over here, we'll make them feel better. That's our goal. It's kind of Job. We want them to feel better. Look at all you have to be grateful for. Not the time. They need to mourn. What else? I know how you feel. Don't say that. We went over there. Don't want to go down that road. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. I can't tell you how many people told me that when everyone thought I had brain cancer. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. You don't know what else to say. I guess that's a default phrase. He's in a better place. Now, if he was a believer, is he? Well, yeah. And they know that. But they're mourning. They're missing him. You'll see him in heaven again one day. Well, that's true, but that's not what they need to hear right then. I promise, ... When I got real sick, we had friends, they were older than us, in our church say, you know what? every Friday we're going to come over to your house and we're going to babysit your kids so you two can go on a date. So you start planning dates because you need that. They thought I was dying. I needed to spend time with my wife, I guess. And so that lasted 1 week. 1 week. And we called them, and either they were busy, they forgot so-and-so was coming into town or whatever else, and or they just didn't return our calls. And I don't fault them because their heart was bigger than their open spaces on their calendar. I get that. But don't make promises that you can't keep. Next. You should be over this by now. Crying out loud. How long does it take? When those guys, their mom and sister died, Mikey, the younger, very extroverted guy, he wore his emotions on his sleeve and he cried publicly and he told that story a million times. 6 months, I think he was through his grief. His brother Dan, very introverted guy, he wouldn't say a word. And I would try to pull it out of him as his youth pastor, not going there. So I remember I finally said, Dan, when you're ready, I just want you to know, I want to talk to you about this when you want to talk to me about it, but not until. So when you're ready. 2 years later, Dan sits down in my office and says, I'm ready. I knew what he was talking about. People just grieve in different ways. But what can you do? All right, now remember, Job's 3 friends, when we say they were nailing it, they weren't saying a whole lot, they were doing things though. Now it was cultural grief, but here's some things you can do. Offer to pick up something at the grocer. Don't tell them, I'm going to the grocery. What can I pick you up? Drop off a casserole. And don't ask, can I bring you food? Because no one wants to be a burden. You can say, I'm going to bring you a dinner. Do you want it tonight or tomorrow night? And then when you do, make sure it's in disposable stuff that they can just throw away, not that they have to clean up and try to get back to you, that kind of deal. Stay in his home, especially if there was an accidental death kind of thing. If you can stay with them, stay in their home, field calls, help them along those lines. Wonderful. Help them with insurance or business issues. If the partner who was in charge of all those things passed suddenly, the other partner may not have a clue what they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to do it. And if you have some degree of knowledge, walk with them on that. Don't let them deal with that stack of papers by themselves. Look after his or her pets. That's very practical. Can I take your dog for a few days? Offer to go on a walk with them. Take them to a movie or to a lunch. Go with them to a support group. If in fact the issue is death of a loved one, let me encourage you about something you may not even be aware of. This church has a ministry called Grief Share, and it's excellent. And it doesn't start every 13 weeks or something. It's constantly going on, and you can jump in at any point. And so I would encourage you to be a part of that if in fact they didn't have to just have passed away. It may have been a while, and you just need to talk with some people. In your bulletin is a card. In a moment, when we take up the offering, you can stick that card in the offering, but you can check on the back. I'm interested in, and then just write Grief Share, and we'll get you information on that. And you can make your call what you want to do. Watch their kids, take the baby for a while. Invite them to be with your family. Don't just think they just need to cry for forever. Don't try to make them laugh, but invite them. We're going to be playing some games. We're going to be watching a movie. You want to come over, be with us? And certainly pray for them. Let me ask you, as we just wrap this whole thing up, let me ask you just a couple questions. Is there a Job person in your circle? Someone that you know you should be walking towards even right now, but you're either standing still or you're walking the other way. You don't know what to do. You don't do evil. You don't do hurting things well. No, none of us do. But if you've got that assignment card, you need to go. Do you have a Job right now that you need to enter into their pain with them? You need to mourn with those who mourn. You need to obey Romans 12. How about this? Let me ask you, are you in a life group? And this is, if you're not in a life group, if you don't have a small group, friends, when you hit Job stuff, and you will, because we all do, who's going to rally around you? This is too big. You need to be in a life group or for that very purpose. And again, your little card, you can check on the back. I'm interested in, not committing to anything. I'm interested in. Just write life groups and stick that thing in the offering plate when we go by. And we'll be in touch with you of how that might happen, how that might be worked out in your life. When our name gets called, when God says, Mark, you've got an assignment. Here's an assignment card. We don't need to worry. It's a hurtful thing. I just need to be with them, and I need to mourn. If words come, they come. If they don't come, they don't come. We can correct faulty theology later, absolutely, but not right then. Just mourn with those who mourn. We can do that. And wouldn't it be cool if we were a church, we were known as a church, known or not, this was the truth, that we walked with people in their hurt, that we honored God with our friends in crises. What kind of ministry might transpire? Would you pray with me? God, I thank you for those who tried to walk with me when I was hurting, when I still, at different times, though they might bumble their way through it a little bit. I thank you, God, for those who truly represented you and brought comfort and brought hope and gave me a right picture of who you are. And God, I would pray that we would be like that. I pray, Lord, for those here who have friends right now they know they need to be walking towards. Would you remind them? Would they obey what you would have for them this morning? God, for those who maybe are here, they're hurting so bad, and they're at the end of their rope. Lord, I would pray, even if their friends don't know, would your Spirit give them a sensitivity to know that they need to reach in anyways? Would you help them, the friends who are hurting, to be honest with their circles, just to share what's going on? Lord, that Jesus might receive the glory in how we handle all of life. And this terrible aspect of life that none of us wants to deal with, would you make us people who respond properly, who deal with it right when it comes at us or when it comes to our friends? I ask that in the name of Christ. Amen.